And okay, so this opponent, Salty, he was also a little late showing up to the game, and my board hadn't come in yet, so I was kind of waiting on my opponent to see if they had a board. um, and he shows up. Like, people are still setting up. It's not a huge deal. But if I had my own, I would have started the clock type thing, you know? But um, he shows up and he asks me what my rating is, and I tell him 1800 on chess.com Rapid, and he is immediately upset because at this point, this was the final game of the tournament. We were paired up because both of us had been doing fairly well in this tournament. At this point, I had 2.5 points. I think he had, what was it? 2 points. I think he had 2 points. So he was gunning for placement in the tournament. The club does have spare boards, but I didn't know where they were yet. I do now. And you wouldn't tell your opponent rating before the game. That's fair. I mean, the pairings do say them, and I didn't mind sharing, but given how opponent reacted, I think maybe I learned my lesson there. But we start playing, and d4, d5, Queen's Gambit, and he goes for the Slav. Pretty standard book moves here, developing our pieces. I did think it was interesting he decided to lock in his light squared bishop. But, you know, it's fine. It's fine. Kind of part and parcel of the this is the Slav, right? Okay. So I'm going to go through the opening. It's a fine opening. And my idea with rook to c1 here is an idea that I took from a Caro line, where instead of having to capture back with the pawn, if they do decide to take, I could capture with the rook instead. This is a good line for black. Yeah, I mean, I'm still exploring my response to d4 when I play as black, but I like the Slav. I haven't practiced it a ton, but I enjoy it. And here was the first mistake. I missed it. I should have locked in the bishop. And they take. And now if you look at eval, it's plus 2.3 to me, even though material is equal, which I find really interesting. And at this point, I start to develop a plan where I want to play in this kind of section of the board, because his pawn structure, Salty's pawn structure, is just a little bit funky, and his pieces aren't coordinated there yet. So I considered pushing here as well, but the reason I didn't make this move was because opponent had the knight pair and I had the bishop pair, and even though my dark squared bishop is on the outside of this pawn chain, I just didn't know like what kind of play my bishops would have if I locked here. So I decided not to, and instead I took away from the center. And my rationale for that, instead of taking towards the center, was if I had taken towards the center, knights become active, and taking away from the center does still allow me this file, which I was hoping to open up. Dan, you might have pushed, but you like my rationale for not doing it? Yeah, and as we'll see, making sure my bishops can stay powerful in this game, literally the game changer. Literally the game changer. So it all worked out okay. Well, this song is different. Okay, Gorillaz, you gotta pass this time. Although, if you're a Gorillaz fan, I have to say that I'm not a huge fan of their most recent stuff. Anyway, E-Repair, push gets your vote. You like both moves, Amuser, depends on your playstyle. Yeah, so, you know, I understand the rationale either way, but that was my rationale, was not getting the knights involved. They take back with the wrong pawn. So my whole plan at this point was to put pressure on this semi-open file. Just line up my entire arsenal there and then slam everything into black's side of the board. But black played well. And I was like, okay, you know, yes, they can have some pretty good coordination there. So my idea with this pretty dumb move was to try to push here and just crack things open a little bit. Because again, I had bishop pair, opponent didn't. I wanted to open things up to give my long range pieces some better breathing room. Interestingly, they thought I should have taken the knight here, but I didn't. And it's interesting this is an inaccuracy because I found this move to be very annoying because one of my plans with my dark squared bishop was to kind of worm my way in there and get a really nice outpost. But the knight to e8 controls a lot of that diagonal, and my dark squared bishop is not very useful at this moment in time. But it was an inaccuracy because they think that the queen should have moved. Fair. And here's where I lose my advantage a little bit. I started pushing the wrong pawns. But they didn't take, and they should have. So I capture back. And I captured back because I just didn't want to like allow play here. But I guess that doesn't really explain it, does it? Disregard my explanation there. I don't know why I made that move. And look at this. Material is equal. Eval is plus 4.4 to me. When I was analyzing this game after the fact, I was shocked by this because I did not follow up correctly. It's a great move. Yeah, it's a great move because look, it's attacking a knight that can't defend itself very easily because if they move the bishop to defend, I get a pawn, right? But I biffed it. Like, I looked at this after the game and I was so mad. So let's just look at this beautiful miss tactic. I'm up so much material in that line. To explain it a little bit further, you know, my level of chess, I need my engine buddy to help me out a little bit to see these moves. But the reason this is so crushing, and I look to see, like, why didn't the king move? Why did they basically... Yeah, Paul, great question. Why didn't the king go to h8? Because it leads to mate. So if we explore this, it's mate in 7. With the right follow-up, which... ooh, let's see if I can remember what the right follow-up is. I think, is it queen to g6? Krishna, you're right. Knight to h4. And then I'm going to have my engine buddy to show the follow-up. And it's one of those mates that's only mate if opponent decides to sack everything. A light squared tragedy indeed. And look at this mate. Look at this mate. It is a mate, not with the queen. She sacrifices herself, but instead it is a mate with the knight because the bishop is blocking g8. And I missed it. I was so annoyed. So to Paul, to answer your question, that's why the rook's only move is to yeet itself off the board. So yeah, just trying not to allow light squares here to completely dominate everything. This line sacrifices a knight. Remember, this is not what I've actually done in the game. This is just what I should have done and didn't. Knight sacrifice to prevent f7, but it doesn't work. And the rook is gone. The horse is gone. The queen is gone. Just devastating. And I missed it. So, good on me. But still in my favor. Still 2+2 for me. Just not winning, you know? And now opponent has tried to deal with that threat by putting a knight on c7. But if you look at the queen, she is not comfortable. Like, not at all comfortable. So I continue to try to, like, move the queen. She only has one option right now. And take the open file. You know, my chess buddy is always like, taking the open file is always a good move. Wasn't best move here, but okay, chess buddy. Okay. Their pieces are so sad. Like, you know, I'm kicking Salty's butt at this point. It's just crushing, you know? And offer a rook trade. That's fine. I've got the open file. They forgot my king's on the other side. Yeah. I'm not going to talk too much smack just yet. And you'll see why soon. So my rook on g6 wasn't best move, but I really liked this move because it pays dividends later on and really prevents the king from accessing some pretty important squares, so it's kind of a back rank issue if this knight moves, right? And I try to kick the bishop out. They take the horse. I take with the rook, which is not the right way to do this. Okay, they grab a pawn. They grab a pawn. They're up a pawn. Salty is up a pawn. The world is not over yet. It's fine. It's all fine. It's still fine. It's still fine. It's still fine. It was not, in fact, fine. If you look at our little eval bar, we can see that it is now in Black's favor, -1. I've lost my crushing advantage with a couple really, really poorly decided moves. And not only are my pawns gone, but Black's pawns are now deadly. Right? Like, 3 passed pawns. It's admittedly not looking great for me at this point. Indeed, Amuser, indeed. So I move my bishop to b6 to just try to lock in my one little pawn and prevent, you know, rook from lining up a little bit with these 3 dangerous passers. Yeah, enough material to make those passed pawns excruciating for me. So at this point, I'm in, you know, just I wasn't in panic mode, but I was in what mode am I trying to say? Like, you know, stop the bleeding from the gaping fatal wound mode. And so my idea is to try to get behind the pawns with my rook to just prevent something bad from happening. And well, wouldn't you know, opponent starts to march their 3 passed pawns. And I bring my rook to just try to stop them. And here's where Eval thinks I'm losing my mind. But my idea with my pawn push is remember my bishop is kind of making the back rank an issue for black. So I figured if I could march my pawns and then get my dark squared bishop involved, if we had a bunch of trades here, then I potentially had some pretty crushing blows. So that was my harebrained scheme. Is it harebrained? Yes. Yes, it is. I acknowledge that now. But, right, trying to stop the bleeding. And wouldn't you know, opponent continues to march their pawns. I try to, block the passer. They push a pawn. I continue my harebrained plan. And now, black gets their rook in the game to escort the pawn that I am not currently doing anything about. I bring my bishop in to just try to do something here, prevent this guy from moving forward. They bring in a knight to make my bishop move, and the problem with this move is I can't go here. Because if I go here, they can just kick my bishop around while continuing the march to my side of the board. So I decided the wrong thing. I decided to move my bishop here because, again, my plan. Eyes here. Right here, G7, the square that all of my hopes and dreams in my mind are relying on. Opponent now has a winning advantage. And they make an error. And I capitalize on it. And at this point, opponent starts... If we start a profanity tally for opponent, this is his second tally. The first tally was when I told him my rating online and he cursed a little bit. But I think this is the first time he said effing bishops, but he did not say effing. He said the full deal. And I felt like I had some breathing room again in this game because no longer were there 3 connected pass pawns. There were only 2 pass pawns that weren't connected. I can take care of those, no problem. Okay. Not quite winning yet, but don't worry. He shouldn't be talking during the game. I named him Salty for a reason. Yeah, 2 out of 4 opponents today during this tournament, not great sportsmen. So I bring my rook in to kick this knight to allow me to win this pawn. They grab my pawn. Okay, that's fair. I grab their pawn and assume that RIP to my bishop pair. I expect this in return. How old was this one? I think this opponent was probably 18. 17 or 18. So I was just like, okay, this sacrifice is worth it to me to get those pass pawns off the board. And then he doesn't take. He doesn't take my bishop. I'm shocked, genuinely shocked. So I'm like, okay, you really don't want my bishop, but really? No, he doesn't want my bishop. So you remember my plan? My plan is working. And eventually I move my bishop because I'm like, okay, I need to move my rook in order for my plan to work. So let me win some tempo by threatening a rook here. Quick return to the eval bar. You'll notice that opponent no longer has a winning advantage. We are back to equal. Opponent moves the rook. And I move my bishop back just to, have something defended here. And allow my rook scope onto g-file. And I can't grab this pawn because they are defending it. He's so traumatized by forking bishops that he doesn't want to get close to him. Yeah. So, okay, I can't grab that pawn. I attack this pawn. And opponent moves horseback to, I think, attack my bishop here. Maybe he regretted not taking it the first time. And instead of taking the pawn here, my idea is if take, check. So he doesn't allow for that. So I take the pawn. In this position, those bishops are lethal. Yeah, remember at the beginning of the game when I was like, I've got bishop pair. I want to open this position up. This is why. This is what I was like investing in. That middle game section where I was losing, all part of the plan. All part of the plan. Okay, so a little fork here of my rook and my bishop. That's okay. That's okay. Oh, no, it's not okay. And I think at this point in the game, I gasped because I realized my error. I went, or like, oh, like I made some little noise, completely involuntary. And opponent's profanity count goes up to 2 because he's very, very salty at this point. And because I think he realizes that he lost his advantage. And in this position, he goes, oh, yeah, you're effing bishop pair, huh? So he spent his time profanitying and being salty and completely misses the blunder. So back to equal. So, yeah. And Takezo, you've been asking during these games about time, and it's about at this point in the game that I am sub 10 minutes. Because that middle game where he was winning, I was spending a lot of time trying to cling on to life. Way too much time in hindsight. So at this point, we're on move 52. I'm starting to feel stressed for time. I know time is a factor. So, opponent blunders. And I think this is the second game in a row where a rook check on the back rank leads to a winning tactic. Where only move is to defend with the knight, because if they had moved the king, there are some mate potentials, right? So does make best move, doesn't allow mate. But the problem with this move is with the correct bishop sacrifice, goodbye bishop pair, I now get his rook for free. Well, not for free, but So we are officially in an end game where I am back to being +2. And I feel pretty confident, except that I have 5 minutes on the clock. And at this point, I don't have time to calculate best moves. I just have to make moves that do not blunder and try to improve my position slowly and surely. And it's at this point that I'm thinking I need to get mating material off the board just in case I flag, because it's looking like I'm gonna flag. So Takezo, practice and blitz game under 5 minutes. Yeah, so I knew, I don't know how I knew this, but I kind of sussed out that under 5 minutes I didn't have to write my moves down. So you'll see here that my final, oh, you actually can't see it. But this is the final move of the game that's written down, and I guess it kind of spoils the ending. But I gave my best approximation of the way the game continued here, where my only goal at this point was to remove this pawn. Come hell or high water, this pawn had to go. I'm not sure USCF rules about 2 knights, but I know 1 knight is a draw because they can't win. So my only goal was to remove that pawn and keep either my pawn or my rook. So I slam into it, didn't mind that it got my pawn off the board. I did not care. And best approximation of the way the game continued. Something like this. And then my clock ran out. And by this point, because I had spent so much time uh, we were the final game in the tournament. We were the final game of the tournament. Everybody in the club was watching on, and I was like, um, you know, I had this strategy. I knew that if I got that pawn off the board, at least it was a draw, and a draw against a 1331 rated player, that was okay for me in this particular tournament. But as soon as it won, Salty went, "Oh, it's a win for me, right?" And um everybody looking on started like murmuring and being like, what just happened? And they had to call the arbiter over. And the arbiter, came over and was like, "Oh yeah, this is a draw because it's not sufficient mating material." And then Salty, in front of everybody who had been watching this game, was like, "Well, yeah, because of her effing bishop pair, and like technically, if I went here and here and here, I could have mated." And the arbiter was like, "No, in USCF, this isn't mating material. If you had a pawn, it would be different." And then he goes, "Well, I had a pawn and she took it." Yeah, buddy. Why do you think I took your pawn?